The land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on the lands of Anishinaabe Nation. This spot where we gather is the traditional lands of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe. We also recognize that this land is now home to the Delaware Nation. This land was settled through the McKee Purchase Treaty of 1790, and we as beneficiaries of the treaty must recognize our responsibilities, including our collective responsibilities to the land and water. Mr. Mayor, we do not have a supplementary agenda this evening. Rules for the council chambers. The municipality of Chatham-Kent supports open meetings that welcome debate of public policy issues in an atmosphere of inclusiveness, integrity, civility, fairness, and respect for differing points of view. Anyone conducting themselves in a way that disrupts, disturbs, or impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting, interrupts or makes derogatory statements or hate speech, defamatory comments about councillors, staff, speakers, or fellow members of the public may result in the removal from the premises. We ask that you do not approach members of council if they are seated in their council seats around the council horseshoe. The use of posters, signage, and literature is also prohibited. Mr. Mayor, this evening we have 7 disclosures of pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, for open session agenda items. The first item is Councillor McGrail on item 11A, the Emergency Transitional Cabin Program location. Councillor Crew has declared conflict on items 11B, C, D, and E, all relating to housing and sole source. And then we have Councillor Hall and Councillor Wright on item 13D, the 2023 record of payment to council-owned vendors. And I'll pass it over to Councillor Allen now with regards to our artist feature.
Our artist feature this week is by Mark Ondrovich. You can be seen behind Judy over here. It's called Oh, What a Tangled Web We Weave. Mike Ondrovich is a practicing artisan whose work is represented in several private collections. He has successfully exhibited his sculpture, furniture, fine metal work, and wood carvings through a variety of venues for over 30 years. His considerable professional skills as a graphic artist and display designer have won his work several awards, both professionally and in his volunteer positions, where he has often donated his design talents to help promote many local community groups. He is a talented teacher and skilled administrator who has worked with people who are challenged by disability. He brings with him considerable expertise as an event and exhibit organizer and fundraiser. Mike has worked tirelessly as an advocate for human rights and equal opportunity. He has served on numerous local boards and committees of organizations whose core purposes was the betterment of their constituent communities.
And now we'll move on to the deputations for this evening. Council, as you are aware, this afternoon I had emailed you all of the deputations that we received. There were 23 in total. 21 of them were emails only, and they will be included with the minutes of this meeting. We have 2 in person, and both of them are present this evening. I will remind both speakers you have a maximum of 5 minutes, and the timer will be on the screen for your assistance. They are both on item 11A, the Emergency Transitional Cabin Program. The first speaker is Miriam Armstrong from PAWR. And the next speaker is Renee Giannoli, and she will be on deck. And I'll call Miriam up at this time.
Councillors, as I learned last week that Victoria Park Place is closing in May of 2025, and that the Hislop Park lot is being favored for 50 emergency transitional cabins, several concerns have emerged from my organization, who has just signed a 3-year contract with the municipality for animal control and pound services in Chatham-Kent. I want to be very clear that I am in support of creating innovative ways to restore dignity and create life-changing opportunities for anyone experiencing homelessness. But I also know that just like animal shelters are a lot more than kennels and cages, there is so much more to be considered. And I don't think that 12 months is enough for such a project to be operational or successful. I feel that a new set of issues will be created and that the municipality will not be prepared for it. How much research has been done so far to understand the scope of this project? I contacted Tony D'Amato Storch, who is the founder of Better Street, a group who assists with tiny home communities for the homeless population, and who has assisted several tiny home communities in southwestern Ontario. And as of yet, he has not been contacted by anyone from Chatham-Kent regarding this project. As highlighted in his book, A Guide to Building a Tiny Homes Community, building cabins is only a small piece of the puzzle. The people we are targeting with this project need a lot more than an 8x10 shed to sleep in. A community center has to be built for access to showers, laundry, and a kitchen. Staff and volunteers need a building to work out of and a safe place for residents to rebuild their life and learn new skills. How would building a new center to complement the cabin's idea be more cost-effective at this location? Many tiny homes communities have been built in the parking lot of an existing vacant building, which makes a lot more sense. But what I'm really wanting to pass along tonight is the immense stress that my staff is now feeling. The Friends of the New Animal Shelter fundraised to build a state-of-the-art, modern, clean, and welcoming facility. My organization has invested over $150,000 to build additional structures and parks for our animals' enrichment and for the families to come interact with them and promote adoptions. Many of our volunteers are high school students and families who will now have to worry about what our potential new neighbors will bring with them. Not only will security be a concern, but also garbage and discarded needles can easily be tossed over our fence. People walking back and forth to access the closest convenience stores located just across our shelter. And last but not least, the biggest concern will not necessarily be the residents, but their guests, who have nowhere to sleep and will have plenty of opportunities to loiter on our property, which offers many covered areas hidden from the street. As our animal control services operate 24/7 and our officers have to enter the shelter at night many times each week, they will now have to worry about people sleeping on the property. Will we need a new morning routine to keep our animals and staff safe by walking each park to ensure no harmful garbage or drug paraphernalia have been tossed overnight? As stated in the media, security will be present in the cabin area, but security on our property, which should be a safe and welcoming space for staff, visitors, and volunteers alike, will absolutely be compromised. We do not have a budget for 24/7 security nor monitoring of the entire property to keep everyone safe. In short, as much as I want a humane solution for all experiencing homelessness, struggling with deep trauma and addiction, and understanding that very few would welcome this project as their neighbors, I feel that this location, which has been earmarked for future expansion of the animal shelter services, is a very poor choice, and it will significantly affect our organization and the services it offers to our community. Based on what I have read in the media and in the report you have received, I would humbly ask Council to reconsider the location and project until a more comprehensive research has been completed and a well-rounded plan has been created to ensure the success of this project, which cannot be rushed or used as a Band-Aid. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. And at this time, I just want to clarify for Council that PAWR is the contractor for animal control services that is housed within the animal shelter on Park Ave. Both the building and the property is owned by the municipality of Chatham-Kent. The next speaker is Renee Ginoli on the same item.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, all guests. I'm honored and grateful to speak to you all again, to be an amplifier for the voices of people experiencing homelessness and people who use substances. Today's topics are tough, with what I'm sure to be varying opinions, tons of questions, and I don't envy any of us having to be decision makers for what amounts to people's very lives. You will come to recognize that every single time I will reinforce that message. I don't need to elaborate on stats. Josh or Kim will do that for me. I don't need to reiterate what all of our organizations do daily. I just need to come back as the voice of people with lived and living expertise and tell you that the weight of all governmental decisions may affect them disproportionately, and the cuts coming all the way down, from the top down, hurt those who are already marginalized. The first piece I want to speak about briefly is about the cabin location. While my opinions may differ from council when it speaks to the wheres and whys of putting a shelter, I am also cognizant of the balancing act that you all must do, that you all must perform. The location ESS is putting forward is the last obstacle needed to be overcome to get this project moving and making positive change in how our community provides services to those experiencing homelessness. The entirety of Rock is excited for the prospect of these cabins being built, as we've watched other communities have even greater success supporting people rebuilding their lives, and now we want that here. We all know that regardless of location, unless you decide to plant this shelter out in the boonies, there's going to be pushback. What these members of our community would like to see is a council who is willing to protect their human rights, value them as much as they value every other citizen, and will fight to move forward with educated and research-based decisions. I have spent countless hours reading about successes and failures in this very service sector, and this is a momentous, forward-moving option for our community to make. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I apologize that we listed it under the cabins, the support services such as the legal clinic and CMHA that are also coming in front of you today are needed in our community. Where we sit in the gap with the people we serve, we recognize that wraparound supports for those most devastated by mental health or substance use concerns are what can sometimes be missing. Organizations that provide positive experiences, work with our most marginalized, are vital in surrounding each person with multiple options for support, aid, and assistance. Without multiple partners in our community working towards a common goal, no work would ever be as effective or impactful. We all learned during COVID that working in silos or with an attitude of we know best is counterproductive and doesn't serve the people we claim to care for. So thank you once again for your time and attention. I appreciate that all of you show care and concern for the citizens who are sometimes the hardest to love. I appreciate that you all recognize that we are trying to work through multi-layered crises that overlap and are devastating to people and communities. Let's follow the data, research, and evidence and keep moving our community towards people-centered solutions that show we care to those whose futures we're discussing tonight. Thank you.
And now we'll move on to consent agenda. The items that have been pulled this evening are items 11A, the Emergency Transitional Cabin Program location, has been pulled by Councillor Sakachi, Councillor Crew, Councillor Brock McGregor, Councillor Story, and Councillor Doyle, with Councillor McGrail declaring a conflict. Item 11B, Housing Focused Outreach Services, has been pulled due to the conflict of Councillor Crew. 11C, Housing Stability Worker, Chatham-Kent Legal Clinic, has been pulled by Councillor Sakachi and a conflict by Councillor Crew. 11D, Sole Source Agreement, CK Housing First Intensive Case Management for Chronic and Episodic Homelessness, has been pulled by Councillor Sakachi and conflict declared by Councillor Crew. And item 11E, Sole Source Agreement, Hope Haven Day Programming and Winter Warming, has been pulled by Councillor Sakachi and a conflict by Councillor Crew. Item 12A, Building Permit Fees, has been pulled by Councillor Doyle and Councillor Anderson. And 13C, the 2023 Annual Investment Report, has been pulled by Councillor Doyle. And 13D, the 2023 Record of Payment to Council-Owned Vendors, it is Councillor Hall and Councillor Wright have both declared a conflict. Therefore, the remaining items on the consent agenda are item 9A, 10A, 13A, B, and E.
Councillor Finn and Councillor Anderson, can I get you to move the consent agenda, please?
Happy to move it.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Anderson?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Item 11, Health and Human Services.
11A, Emergency Transitional Cabin Program location.
Councillor Sakachi and Councillor Crew, can I get you to move the recommendations, please?
Happy to put it on the floor, Mayor Caniff.
I'll second it.
Councillor Sakachi?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I see that the whole team's back there. Is there someone in particular that you can be addressing the questions tonight, or just kind of ask and whoever's the most confident in the question is going to come up? Is that the best way to go forward? So I guess just because I've worked with Josh significantly over the last several months, and he's been extremely helpful on this, for the people that haven't had the opportunity, Mr. Myers, to read the report, can you just talk through a little bit briefly what staff has done looking through? I know that you looked through almost 24 sites. I know Mr. Harper has as well, but the things that have went through kind of the procedures of eliminating or selecting a site for the people who haven't read the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To you, Councillor. I'm Ray Harper, the Director of Municipal Housing Development. So for the past several months, administration has gone through all our municipal properties to try to find an appropriate site that would meet the needs of this program, as well as meet the constraints of the site location, whether it's a daycare or a school. So going through all of our municipal sites that was large enough, and another coming up with a short list of what properties could work, as well as looking at properties that could potentially be purchased. And I think it's important to know, for council and the community to know, there are a lot of vacant properties around Chatham-Kent, but there are a lot of constraints there that most people aren't aware. Whether the lot is vacant for a reason, because there's environmental concerns, that's why hasn't been developed, as well as underground infrastructure concerns, as well as a property that some community members believe that are municipally owned, but in fact are not municipally owned, and they're not for sale by the property owner.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And just a question directly to Mr. Miles as well. So Josh, I know that, when we're reading these reports as well as the conversations, we speak about the wraparound services that are provided to, the residents that are experiencing being unhoused. But I guess it's important for me to know, in the decision-making process, is there any additional wraparound services that we're also going to implement for the neighborhood in regards to, we're looking at the site plan, the safety aspects. I think Miriam did a great job at articulating some of the concerns, and I think that they're very valid concerns. So what can we ensure, if this is passed today, is going to be done moving forward to ensure that, especially a partner in our community that does such a valuable job in our community, that they're also going to have services provided to them to protect their investment as well as the municipal property there as well?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So should tonight's recommendations be passed, the next step that we have with myself and the team is to reach out to our immediate neighbors, which includes Paul beside this site. And the first thing we need to do is we need to listen. So we need to hear what concerns they have, what unique features may be around their property, and then we need to work as a team to figure out how can we best support them in the community. We want the people that will be accessing this program to feel like they can come here safely, and to do that they need to be a good neighbor, but we also hope that we can be together as a community to support them. This is a temporary program. It is not mandatory, it is voluntary. We have expectations on anyone that will be accessing this and receiving the services. So through, I believe, our listening activity that we can do with the neighbors, and then planning out what our next steps can be, I believe we can support the immediate neighborhood with any tenants that would be accessing our program.
And I know that in the motion, the recommendations, obviously the RFP for security services, as well as the RFP to secure the cabins. So we're not going to actually look at be able to see what the site plan looks like as of right now, obviously. But what kind of things, in the top of your mind, is your team going to consider to ensure not just the safety of the people utilizing the services there, but also the safety of the residents that are going to be around there? I do know that not all the unhoused, by all means, I don't want to create a blanket statement, but we also know that there are several individuals that are, experiencing some significant challenges. So what kind of services are you going to look at the site to ensure that there's a mutual safety for the parties outside and inside the cabin area?
So first off, we will certainly continue to work with our partners, with the police and with EMS, depending on the situation. But one of the things we're looking at with this property is, because this is self-contained living, independent living, it allows case managers and our staff to free up their time so that they're not essentially managing behaviors within a congregate setting. So by having security on site, having some of their time freed up for this, it allows us to also move those staff wherever their clients are. So if we have something that is happening in the immediate nearby vicinity, and we know it's our client, we'll be able to assist as best we can. There are limitations that we have to acknowledge. We will have 50 people approximately staying in this program. If there are situations occurring across the community, we do receive concerns about encampments across the community. I can't necessarily point to this program as the cause of that. So there are things that I think we can do in the immediate vicinity on Hislop Street and Park Street, and especially with the parking lot beside us, that we can do to assist. But I want to caution that if it's, depending how far it goes, it just spreads our resources. And we would have to if we were to extend that zone, we'd have to look at what is realistic and what would the cost be of that. Not to say we wouldn't do it, but that would be something we'd have to explore those costs further.
And I know the list is quite long, so I'm going to keep my comments just a couple quick ones. So I also know you did a lot of work speaking to outside communities on the cabins and how they work. In your professional opinion, I know it's a recommendation that's coming here, so it's obviously going to be something that you support. Can you just really briefly just say the benefits that you think that would support people better having their own space? And the other question I have to follow up on is, if there is challenges from like a behavioral standpoint, they don't follow like having to do an N9 or a tenancy, like we're able, if they're not sticking and adhering to like I'm not sure if you've called it the program, is there the ability for us to also ensure that they're not going to be able to stay for 100 days or 90 days as well? If you can just follow up with that.
Yeah, so first I'm going to start off with the benefits and why we went this way. So you may recall several reports that we've brought back to council on this topic. We've been working in this for a number of years now, and that recognition across the province that we've had and our partners have had that this unfortunately is not getting better because the upstream systems that are driving this are not changing. So we've looked at this problem at this point of, well, what is the future state that we want to build? And that's where independent living has kind of come to the forefront. We have experience operating shelters. I think shelters serve a very important purpose in our society, but they're not great. They are a very difficult spot for someone to heal in. I'm sure many of us in this room would have a difficulty sleeping in a room with this many people in it. So if we are going to be looking at a longer term emergency option, this is where this idea has come from. And we've seen there is a variety of models across the province and across the country. Myself, I've been a fan of what I'm seeing in Waterloo and Peterborough, where they do have about 50 cabins or so. They have the on-site supports. Their focus is on moving people out, though. It's not a community. It's not trying to build a community there where people will call this their forever home. We want to provide them the life skills that they need to move forward. Some of the immediate benefits that we'll be seeing, or I've been able to see from the other models, is because they have their own place and they have a communal kitchen where we can have staff supporting them, we can see what barriers they're presenting. So if we have someone who's suffering with hoarding-like tendencies, we can see that here and begin to address those barriers before they move into a longer-term unit, and to your point, where it may make it much more difficult to address given the state of the landlord and tenant board. So there's immediate things that we can begin to put in to give those life skills so that when they move either into the private market or within our community housing portfolio, we've already begun to address those, but we also have the staff that are following with them. Very difficult things for us to identify while living in a shelter, and so those benefits become loud and clear. And to that point, from our understanding with speaking with Waterloo, they're looking to expand. So for the communities that have done this, they're thinking about the next steps. Time's never on our side, so in conjunction while we're doing this, that's why in the report, we're talking about the other steps we need to do. This is one piece of the puzzle. We need to continue moving in this direction. With respect to the last question on if someone's this isn't the program for them, they don't want to participate or they become a safety concern to their neighbor, this does not fall under the landlord and tenant board. We'll have participation agreements. If you don't want to follow that, then you can't stay here. We could have you leave the property by the end of the day. If it was an emergency, we would contact the police.
And just, Josh, while you have the floor, and not to put 100% accurate numbers out there, but I think it's really important to the public to state what you guys have actually done at Victoria Park Place. And speaking with you last week to hear some of the numbers, can you talk about some of the success that you've had in regards to how many people has utilized the service in the last, not people, but how many beds you've actually have been utilized in the last 2.5 years?
I'm just going to call on a colleague to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the question. I'm just pulling up our last week's report, if you can bear with me. So your question was, sorry, how many nights we've provided?
Correct.
Oh my goodness, it's the wrong one. So we have been operating for 674 nights as of April 4th. We have had 28,172 beds stayed in since we've been there, with 495 unique different people.
And one question I get, and I know roughly the answer, is how many of those people that we've housed there have actually went on to successful placements of housing? I think that's important to pass on the community as well. And if you don't have the exact number, I think that.
Thank you for the question. I do know that we have housed 162 individuals that were at VPP from the time of operation from May 2022 until the end of February. So 162 of those individuals were housed from the program.
Thank you. And Josh, last question to you is, I get the one question I've received, I guess, the most times this week, which there actually hasn't been a lot of people reaching out, is why inside like Chatham proper? Like, why are we looking at, inside the city interior? Why are we not looking in a rural area? And I think that after speaking with you, it's a question that maybe it might sound like an easy answer, but I think it's important, and what you have the floor to provide that response of why you think that it's better rate inside of a city.
Yes, absolutely. If I can, I just would like to add one more piece. Approximately 400 people through CK Cares has been housed during this time period. So that means if someone moves from the shelter to couch surfing for a period of time and we're still working with them, we count that as a separate move-in. So the first number that Ms. Crew shared was directly from VPP. So the total housed during this time was much higher. But why would we not move to a further location? The more barriers we put into accessing this program, the harder it is and the less desire someone's going to have to access it. So if we moved it to, let's say, Dresden, if someone doesn't have transportation, they're not going to be able to access there. If they were to go there, they're not going to be able to access the support programs that they need. So when we're looking at addressing this and what we'll be doing and announcing or moving forward with is, our goal is to end homelessness in the community as quickly as we possibly can. Making services harder to access will not reach that goal. In fact, what we'll see is encampments will grow at a faster pace.
And then to Gord, to Mr. Quinton, so like from a financial standpoint, how much challenge is it going to be for the municipality long term to put something like this in place? So we hear temporary, and we hear that we're developing a site plan, but I think the community as a whole really needs to know what type of financial impact we're talking about long term by making this decision. Because I hear temporary. My biggest concern is that we're putting this in place here, and this is a service, although very important, is never going to leave our city. And I'm just curious from Gord to hear what that looks like long term for our tax base.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in the January 15th report that Josh and the team brought, it outlined estimates of what the cost will be, and it's approximately $2 million annual of operating cost and $3.1 million for the capital. But of course, that the capital will really depend on the tender process, and hopefully comes in less than that amount. So it's a very good question, though. Ultimately, who pays the bill? We hope that we can, over the next, as these cabins are being built over the next year, continue to lobby the province and perhaps the federal government, but through the province for funding. Otherwise, this will land on property taxpayers in the 2025 budget update. The plan as detailed in the report was to debenture the capital cost over a 15-year period. And so spread the capital costs over that 15-year period. Then you'd also have the annual operating cost and deal with that in the 2025 budget update unless we can secure upper level funding.
Thank you. And I think now that we have a plan together, Mr. Dubin and Mayor Caniff, I'm hoping that this can be actually submitted as a detailed plan to see if there is any additional funding. I'd just like to thank everyone for their patience on the floor. It's a very important matter. I know that no solution or no site is perfect, and it is a very challenging decision, but I do appreciate all the staff's time and effort that went into this. Thank you.
Councillor Crew, followed by Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Most of my comments were addressed by Councillor Sakachi. So Josh, can you talk about the timeline that we're looking at? And these aren't going to be in order because I scribble.
So right now, we're working with our partners in IES to complete the RFP. I don't have a firm timeline, but we do know of May 2025 is the end of our lease. So for all of us, we're working as quickly as we can to make sure that we reach that. The next steps is to get the RFP out, find the successful vendor, and then return to council with a more finalized operating budget plus the capital budget for the final approval. During this time, though, the team's also working on the programming pieces to it, what we're taking from VPP and what we're leaving behind because of the different models.
Thank you. And this will not address the folks who doesn't want to access our services. The folks that are living in parking lots, encampments, that's the concern. That's another concern. And I just want people to understand this is not going to address that particular situation on its own. Hopefully, they will want to participate in our programs, but can you address that?
Yeah, on the surface, I certainly would agree that that this cannot change that, but what can change that is the work that Hope Haven and Rock Missions continue to do. They continue to make relationships with people who've really had no reason to trust government anymore. And so as they build that, they build trust, then they're able to bring them to our programming. It doesn't work every single time, but one of the times it will, and we've seen that with many people. So this is where it is a continuum of service, and we're looking to build up from our emergency side, but we plan to continue to come back to council with recommendations on how we can continue to change so that there are no tents in the downtown or in the waterways of Chatham-Kent.
Good. Can we talk about the human rights of housing? Can we touch on that? It's in the report. I was really happy to see that that was included. And I just want you to touch on it because I know that not everyone reads our reports, although it's interesting reading.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dave Taylor, Director of Legal Services. So appreciate you bringing this matter kind of to the floor to make sure we speak to this because it is a really important piece. So there's a number of different components about human rights interacting with how we deal with homelessness at a municipal level and really at all other levels of government. One of them is really to recognize that in various different ways, housing has been recognized as a human right. And I think if you ever have to deal with not having shelter, you recognize that should be the case in our society. But really one of the pieces that goes most importantly to the discussion that's on the floor tonight in terms of the area of human rights and housing is the importance of making sure that people who aren't housed are also treated in the same way as other residents are as much as possible. There's obviously going to be needs for us to, as a government who's creating a location for this type of program, to consider impacts on neighborhoods and that type of thing. But most importantly, we need to treat people who aren't housed and need shelter in a way that's consistent with their human rights. And that includes, to one of the questions that Councillor Sakachi asked earlier, the idea of they should be in a residential area or near residential areas because those are the same kinds of places that they can get services for and be connected to the community and actually kind of move along the path towards long-term sustainable housing. And so, certainly happy to answer any questions, but just from a high level, those are some of the really core important principles between housing and human rights that I wanted to draw to Council's attention.
Thank you, Dave. I just wanted a high-level explanation. So I haven't received a lot of feedback pretty much at all, but the things that I have heard was that the neighbors support this and that they want to be included in the development as it moves along. So they ask to be engaged. They just want to be included in decisions and things as it moves along. So most people are supportive. They understand that it's transitional housing. Our neighborhood has dealt with a lot of things over the last 25 years. And when people are down and out, we usually don't count them out. We try to help them out. So, maybe that's, if you have people that have already been in situations, and seen this firsthand. Maybe that's why it's a bit more inclusive. I think that people seem to be a little more tolerant. As the timeline, one question, Miriam asked about experts. You did contact experts. I think Councillor Sakachi touched on that, but you did talk to someone who is an expert in and is experienced in the cabin model.
Yes, prior to, during, and we plan to continue. We have contacts who we've worked with, or I've worked with for a couple of years in Waterloo. We've also been watching Peterborough and speaking with them firsthand. Built for Zero Canada and the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness continue to do webinars on these programs as they're starting to see them develop it. There are several different styles of tiny homes or cabin villages or transitional housing, and I would say not everyone is the same. So we are looking at a bridge housing model, transitional housing model, where it is part of life skill training to get you back out. We're not looking to build a tiny home community, which I think sometimes there are experts on the different types of models, but just because it's a tiny home does not mean that they will all be the same. So the question, yes, we certainly have been in contact with those staff, and we plan to continue. We're trying to learn as much as we can from their lessons learned so that we can have a bit of a smoother path ahead.
Okay, and in the when you start the development and the design and everything, can I ask that you include CEPTED principles, crime prevention through environmental design? We can look at things like barriers, the natural barriers, making things less likely for crime to happen. All those different principles that I think I preach around here once a year about that. But if we could include that, that might alleviate some problems before they happen. And I think I'm almost done. I agree that we don't want cabins. We don't want homeless shelters. We don't want people living on our streets. But the reality is we have to deal with it. And financially, we're going to have to deal with it. And human issues are very expensive issues. They're expensive in the most harmful way for the people themselves. And if you can imagine not being wanted when you're already down and out in an area. And I think that people, it's really nice when I seen it's okay in my backyard. That was really something nice to read, because mostly it's when they don't say it. It's not okay in my backyard. And it's not said, but it's implied. So that's nice to see. I'm going to tell one little story. I spoke to a very good friend of mine, a very long-standing friend who lives very close to Victoria Park Place. They said I could tell their story, but they didn't want me to tell their name. And not because they're afraid of people on the street, they're afraid of their neighbors and retaliation. But her story was, I said her, anyway, it's a lady. So her story was that she's lived there. She was afraid when it opened, just like everyone else was. She was very nervous about the situation that was coming to her neighborhood that she had lived in for a very long time. And I asked her to be very honest with me, and she said, well, I was scared, and I'll tell you, but she said, actually, there's been absolutely nothing. And she lives very close. And she called me back a few minutes later after our conversation, and it was nice to hear these things, because people don't normally share the good news stories unless they're asked. But she called me back and she said, I just don't want you to share my name, but I want you to tell everybody this. I don't want the shelter to go, because I feel safer with it there because of the services and the people that are there. She said the issues that were there before with the encampments and people going to the Black Bridge and over into Gold's property were there before. It's not going to go away when Victoria Park Place closes, and she's worried about it closing and an empty building being there. So I just wanted to share that story. It was nice to hear that someone wants it to stay and doesn't want it to go. So I don't think I have anything else. I've probably taken up more than my 5 minutes, Mr. Mayor, as usual.
Councillor B. McGregor, followed by Councillor Story, then Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I don't have any more questions. Councillor Crew and Councillor Scotchy got through most of those, but I am pleased to see this coming forward tonight and looking forward to the next steps, seeing the project manager come on board, seeing these RFPs come back. And I do think it's a time that we should take an opportunity to talk about some of those upstream challenges. And we just spoke about it on Thursday at the Board of Health. We have these upstream challenges, and many of them are income challenges. So we just saw a provincial budget come out last week. Since 2018, OW rates have not increased. We all know what have happened in costs since 2018. So this is an unsurprising increasing challenge in our community. We're facing the challenge around this horseshoe because other levels of government are not picking up the slack and not doing their part, and property taxpayers will continue to pay that cost. Municipal governments will continue to struggle to fund and find solutions for the most vulnerable in our community until we see increased support. So I think every time these reports come forward, we should make sure that we're highlighting upstream solutions as well and talk about the real causes of the situations our communities are in. Thank you.
Councillor Story, followed by Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple additional questions. I've really appreciated what all my fellow councillors have said so far. It's been extremely informative. What are the accessibility features of these cabins and of the site in general?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Story. Thank you for the question. At this point in time, we do need to work through the specifications through the process, through the RFP process, and we will be working through that. We will be looking at accessibility issues. We do that now currently with our existing emergency shelter, and we do ensure that those individuals with needs are placed into appropriate settings. And so if the cabin program isn't going to work for that individual, they will be placed into a motel. We will support them and help them to move into appropriate housing.
Thank you. I don't think it necessarily needs to be any kind of amendment or a motion, but perhaps you could consider when you're doing the RFP that there might be, for example, a certain number of cabins that have accessibility options for them, or just keeping that in mind when you're putting that forward. I'd certainly appreciate that, and I know the accessibility committee would as well. So thank you for sharing that additional information. I had a couple comments from residents come in the last day or two about some concerns about the next 13 months, and are we comfortable with the timeline as it stands that we will be able to, I know we've talked in a couple different ways, but we're in April 2024 and May 2025. Do we feel comfortable that we'll be able to move into these cabins in May of 2025, or I guess June 1st, what have you, 2025?
Thank you for the question. I think the best way for me to share that is the moment we don't or are no longer comfortable, we'll be coming back to council. We know that the lease ends, and that's where this is a priority project for staff. They know there's a lot of people depending on it.
Okay. And that sort of follow up on that, thank you, Josh. How often will staff, or to Jody, how often will staff be reporting to council on this between now and then?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor. We'll be bringing a report back once we have issued the RFP, assuming that this is passed. We will be providing updates. We will be providing some information with regards to the costs, and then when it's appropriate, we will be bringing additional information back to council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple more quick questions. In the report, you mentioned a forum discussing homelessness. I might have misunderstood in the report, maybe I might not read a few more times, but the forum is discussing homelessness as a higher level issue versus this specific cabin proposal. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that is correct. It is looking at homelessness at a higher level from a systems perspective, looking to bring community partners and organizations together so that we can identify strategic priorities and actions that will help to reduce and ideally eliminate homelessness within Chatham-Kent.
Okay. And will we be hearing the results of that once they're ready?
Absolutely.
Okay. I look forward to that. Thank you. The steering committee you mentioned as well, are there people with lived experience? There's certainly several very qualified organizations participating on that steering committee. are there people with lived experience on that committee as well?
So at this time, with the volunteers that were selected from for the steering committee, Rock Missions and Hope Haven are on that, and we've had some very preliminary conversations on assisting us to ensure that some of their members of lived experience do have a role in that. I don't want to overcommit them, but I believe that they are very much looking forward to having their friends and clients and colleagues assist with this.
Okay, yeah, I think that's really important, so I'm glad to hear that. I know I also received some questions about, there are certainly at the current location that's in a residential neighborhood, there are homes with families in that area. I'm sure this is also a residential neighborhood. Potentially, if we do move ahead with it, there will be families with children in that area. Are we finding any issues currently with our current site in terms of issues? I think Councillor Crew might have alluded to that as well, but that are affecting families who are neighbors of Victoria Park Place?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, we don't have any concerns that have been addressed by the neighbors. We did look a little bit at changing some of our curfews within the shelter program to just accommodate some of the bus pickup times, but other than that, there's been no issues. And just a reminder that this program is a little bit different than the shelter program itself, so it will be operating very differently. So we won't have those same types of issues and concerns with the new cabin program.
Okay. I think it's interesting that we've heard a few different, maybe interchangeable terms. When I thought of tiny homes, I don't know if anyone watches like Home and Garden TV, and there's these tiny homes that get really jacked up with these amazing designs and different things. Like, tiny homes to me actually meant something very different than transitional cabins. And I wonder if anyone might be able to perhaps delineate the differences between a transitional cabin model versus a tiny home. Because I think there might be, I know I had a little bit of a challenge understanding, making sure I was clear on the differences between those two models.
Certainly, and I'll share with the team, we are working on getting a solid name to differentiate the two, because we know we need more of every type of housing.
Sure.
The best way I think I can explain this is, and if looking at the January 15th report, there's some photos in there. There is no bathroom to this. I wouldn't call it a home because there's an element to that. We don't want people to view this as their home forever. We want them to engage in services so they move on, because we will desperately need to turn these units over for the next person. So the big difference is there will be a communal shower and bathroom, communal kitchen. They will have a fridge and a microwave in their own bed, and they can come and go as they please. So there's a little bit further away from where a shelter was, but not quite to the point where you could call it a home and could live there forever. And the type of quality of heating and cooling in the units we're looking for, that is where we did need to very much work with our engineering partners to make sure we're getting something that's going to last.
Thank you. I appreciate all that information, and I look forward to this. I know this, we don't have a lot of options at our disposal at this council, and I know as administration, you have looked, at every possible model under the sun, both in North America and beyond, because there are certainly communities across Canada, across the US that are facing this. We don't have a magic wand at this table to end homelessness, or all of a sudden, as to Councillor Crew's point, to ensure that everyone that we see right now living in tents in our downtown have homes overnight. But I do think that we really have to start building the foundation and the pathways to care with community partners like those who are here tonight, and my comments do sort of extend to all the agenda items tonight, so I won't repeat myself another 4 times with the next 4 agenda items, but with community partners who we're also discussing later on in the agenda. We can't afford to wait any longer. I would encourage everyone watching at home around this horseshoe to read the deputations that were submitted tonight. They weren't necessarily related to this specific agenda item, but they were from people with lived experience who have used services that are provided either by the municipality or by our community partners. And I would encourage everyone around this table, if they haven't had a chance yet, because there were a lot that came in this afternoon, but to really read these deputations from people that are in our community who are really in vulnerable situations. I think it will make a real an impact on how we might view this. So if you're watching at home, please take a minute to read those in the minutes. The history of housing in our community and in every community truly is a history of whose voices get to be heard and whose voices get to be amplified versus the voices of vulnerable communities, often those who do not have a voice around this horseshoe or at many, or some might say any, decision-making tables. And I think we need to really hear those voices, not just tonight, but throughout this process. We keep talking about making difficult decisions, making tough decisions, but I would actually qualify that. The situation is difficult. The situation we find ourselves in is tough. But creating a safe and healthy community for everyone in our community, showing compassion for people in crisis, for people in vulnerable situations should actually be a really easy decision. Thank you very much.
Councillor Doyle, followed by Councillor Bondi, then Councillor Jumville.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Most of my questions have been asked so far, so I just want to say very good job on this. It's nice to see this coming around to the next step. So you've got my support. I just have one question actually that wasn't asked so far. Just because we're number 3 about basically going into debenture for this. So just curious, is there not any reserves or investments that you would recommend to use as opposed to going into a debenture? For Gordon.
I'll start off, and if anyone has anything to add, that'd be great. A couple things. Number one, I think we need to still try to encourage upper levels to fund this. And by funding it, if you were to fund it today from a reserve, that's basically giving the message to upper levels that you don't need their help. So that's my number one message, is that still asks, let's chase down every option to get funding. Although I personally, and I think we're all very doubtful that we'll receive any, but the ask still needs to go because I'm not quite sure why this is just on property taxpayers to pay for. But perhaps at a later date or during the 2025 budget update, there is that option for council to say, no, instead of debenturing it and adding the capital costs, spreading it over time, that you'd like to take money from another reserve. I'm not picking on any reserves tonight, but a road reserve, a whatever reserve, you could take $3 million from another reserve and pay for the capital cost and just deal with the operating costs in the 2025 budget update. And just a reminder, in the 2024 to 27 budget, we funded the shelter till in its current location till its closing in May of 2025. But in the 2025 budget update, we do need to add the operating moving forward and then a decision on how we're paying for the capital.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And then, so to go to ask upper levels government, do you need anything from council to do that, or you guys could do that on your own?
No, I don't think we need anything from council. I think Josh and the team will apply for and make the case known, but we'll see where that goes.
Okay, thank you very much. No, nice work to everybody involved in this. Thank you very much.
Councillor Bondi, followed by Councillor Juvenville.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Josh, I guess this is for you. This might be a little premature, but maybe not. I did get a call today about this, and one of the questions was, what would be the vetting process for admission to the program? And the point was, from the person that called me, she, not really giving away the identity there, said, well, what if somebody from Toronto or, I don't know, Goderich, forever, decides, hey, this looks like a pretty good, because it is pretty good, like it's their own place, right? Came down and said, geez, how about me? And not only that, but I'm sure there's more than 50 people that are going to want to be part of, well, not want, but, need the service. So do you have any method of selection, I guess?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So right now, our current process, which we'll continue over, is if someone contacts the homeless response line, we go through what we call diversion, working with the person, get their basic information and figuring out, okay, where else can you go? Because the last place we want is for you to come here. Same process is going to continue there. If someone from another community were to come to access this program, we would figure that out pretty quickly, if not on that call the next day, because there is a participation fee that will come with this program that comes from social assistance rates. So because of our partnerships, we'd be able to work with that individual. Unfortunately, because of our limited municipal resources, our policy has been, and I envision continuing, that you must have CK or a history of CK residency to qualify. That and or a demonstrable familial support network on why this is going to be successful. So similar to some of our colleagues across the province, we would work with that individual to transport them back to their original home community. Whether they take us up on that or not would be up to them, but they wouldn't be able to access this program any further. There are in some situations, if it's domestic violence and we can approve that, we'll make an exception for those situations because they're fleeing violence.
Right, okay, good, that's great. Just one more quick question. If somebody moves into one of these things, and I know they're not permanent, but they'll give a permanency feel as it's their own, space, right? So at what point do people move along? Because they might not want to, because, if it's working, and I guess my point is that, there are people that live in rooming houses, right, that have shared kitchen and bathroom facilities, and they pay rent and they work, so there might be a little resentment, on that. So is there a threshold? Like, for instance, if somebody is in the program, is residing there, and they get a job, does that, see what I mean? It's a difficult situation. I don't want to get in trouble, but you know what I'm saying? Well, you can shake your head. I'm the guy that'll get murdered. But when do you say, okay, you've been here long enough, things are looking good for you, so it's time to move on? I'm just thinking like it looks like it could be, it'll just give a real permanency feel, whereas, a shared, I worked at a homeless shelter in London, Ontario 30 years ago, and nobody wanted to be there, like at all, because there was, I think we had up to 16 people, it was just a men's shelter, in each room, and I did the night shift, and that was my thing, but I can assure you that people did not want to be there. And I'm just thinking this may be, you may have a hard time getting people to say, well, I'm going to go somewhere else and pay rent and, all that sort of stuff. So the question is, sorry, I'm dragging it out. Do you have a marker of when it's time to move along?
So we won't have a set date for any individual, but what we will do is we'll work with each person case by case. And what our requirements are going to be is you have to have some demonstrable goal that we're working towards every single week. And over time, we'll review those cases as we do now and work with that individual. If this doesn't seem to be making any progress, what can we do differently to address that? There is a piece of it that, and I'm very happy for the question, because when in between both reports, we do identify that this program on its own will run into that problem. When our wait list for social housing is 7 years long, we're going to continue to run into that problem. So we are addressing that by looking at other avenues to increase those housing options so that hopefully someday soon, this isn't a good option. And so that they can see, well, I can get into rent geared to income housing, or I can get into a boarding house, which would probably be better than this situation. But to your point, a lot of the decisions we're making, we have to find that balance of this is a program, this is a service, this isn't a forever home. So meals every day, there's some decisions like that where we're not going to be able to continue doing that, partly as an encouragement to work with us, but we want people to be able to find that permanent home elsewhere. But for a 6 months or 90 days, I would struggle to put that in versus every individual is going to have a case manager. What is this week's goal? What is next week's goal? And are we making progress?
So there'll always be that encouragement to
absolutely
move on to the next step in life. And just on that, in the current Victoria Place, is there any limitation of residency?
So the limitation comes to participation. And I can see from the notes that I review or talking with staff, we do regularly have conversations around someone's participation. And when it gets to a point where, unfortunately, you're not participating in these services, we do end their stay. They can come back, sign a new participation agreement, identify what their goals were. We'll have conversations about what didn't work last time. But we do, similar to the next stage, need something because we need the bed. There's always somebody else that needs that bed. So it's very difficult if you're not participating when Johnny wants the bed for us not to free it up for that person.
So just quickly, could you explain what you mean by participation?
Yeah, are you meeting with your case manager? Are you going to see your doctor? Have you contacted your social assistance worker to advise them of your address change? Can you identify where you want to live? Can you identify where you lived last and what went wrong that time? What can we do or what can we learn from you to develop that plan to get you out of here?
Okay, fair enough. Okay, great, thank you.
Your Worship, maybe if I can add, this is a good opportunity for Mr. Myers perhaps to comment about the idea of having jobs. I think there's a myth out there that people who are staying in a shelter don't have jobs. There are people who stay in our shelter that do have a job. So getting a job does not kick you out of the program. So I wonder if Mr. Myers can talk about that just a bit more.
Yes, absolutely, and I could divert, but I know our program manager, Kim Crew, we do usually have several people that are working a job. It is very hard to maintain that job, though, in a shelter atmosphere because things can go wrong. You won't have your alarm clock. But we have a lot of, or several people through our time at Victoria Park Place who have maintained. They're in, they're out pretty quickly. The cost of securing rent, though, and finding those units, it continues to be a barrier. So they know they need the income from their job, so they're desperately trying to hold on so that they can move out. But I do see that happening here, and I still would struggle to see someone living in a cabin, working full-time, can afford a place, and after 3 months still being there. They would have the income, they would be far from what we're offering at that point.
Councillor Juneville, followed by Councillor Finn.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, my first question was just asked by Councillor Bondi regarding vetting, so I appreciate that because there are a lot of concerns from the community. A lot of people think that there are individuals coming from other municipalities here, so the fact that you are doing a vetting process to make sure that the tiny cabins are going to be used strictly for Chatham-Kent residents or people with familiar ties to Chatham-Kent is good to know. My other question is just regarding you had two other options of potential places. So one was 421 to 461 Park Ave East. I don't know, would that be something that you would consider if that would work better for PAWR? Or maybe that wouldn't work better for them? Just wondering if it's something we should explore or if it would be detrimental to the whole process.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To you, Councillor. So in that report, it outlines that property that we're looking at for future, but right now there's a lot of unknown variables. So right now, that was the old Public Works operations site, and we're transferring the materials on that site to the new site. That will take a couple months to do so. And then once that's done, environmental ESA phase 2 process then begins. And what that is we test the soil, we do core samples of the soil as well as water well testing, and that determines what the environmental concerns are on the site. And then after that report, then that becomes a remediation process, what that would look like and how long it would take and how much it would cost. So we don't know the answers to those questions or the timelines on those at that point.
Do you have a guess at all? Could it be a year? Could it be 2 years? Or could it be 6 months? Or do you have any?
Until we receive that report, we would be completely guessing on what the soil conditions and environmental concerns are on that and how long it would take.
Okay, thank you.
Just supplemental to that, so the challenge too is that once we do the investigation, the cost of cleaning up that site could be considerable, and that'll have to be a decision for council. And as Mr. Harper said, the timing would be considerable. However, I will say that it's obviously right next door to PA. And so depending on how that property goes over the next year and a half, depending on how long this takes, the municipality will own land next to PA. So we may be able to address any expansion initiatives that PAWs have. Obviously, we can't commit to that now because we don't know whether or not that land will be developable, but it's certainly our hope that it will be. And it'll be council's decision to make once you find out if and what the cleanup costs are.
Councillor Finn.
Thank you, Your Worship. One question was just answered. Second one I was asked today, will the residents of these cabins be contributing in any way to that area? Like, I know with a co-op, they each have a job outside where they cut grass or they maintain certain areas. And will there be a cost, a minimal cost to any of them to reside there?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. There will be a minimal cost similar to our youth transitional housing program. We call it a participation fee. It is very much in line with their social assistance rates. I think it's important that they're able to contribute to this, and I know many of them want to contribute to this. As for types of job opportunities nearby in the neighborhood, like cleanup, I'm not sure. We haven't gone that far, and I think what I would be reliant on is groups like Eastside Pride, Rock Missions, or Hope Haven, and seeing what their thoughts on something like this and how that could potentially fit in, and then giving that avenue for them to just share their volunteer opportunities versus us as partly a landlord pushing or encouraging that in that way. I would rely on our community partners for it.
No, I'm just wondering about the area itself. Like, if there's going to be grass there, somebody's going to need to cut the grass, and will there be, like I said, at a co-op where they have a committee that does each certain areas and has a routine?
Yeah, sorry, thank you for the clarification. Grass cutting or things of that nature, and I would say no, because then we'd have to get into storing the machinery, taking care of it. But the goal is to give people the skills that they can maintain their unit. So when we're cooking in the kitchen together and on those days preparing meals, helping us to clean up. This is part of your meal or things along that nature. Cleaning the bathrooms, cleaning your cabin, things like that, absolutely. We'd like to provide the tools so that they can do it, but we need their help to do it. And I know from being at Victoria Park Place, many of them desperately want to help out.
Thank you, that's it.
Councillor Scotchy, final comment. Well, then we'll
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Canada. Just to Mr. Dubin, I know I don't want to put an amendment in there, Mr. Dubin, but can we just have like a surety in open agenda that for sure that the staff will conduct a kind of a conversation with PAR immediately if this is passed tonight, just because obviously they're a very valuable partner in the community, and you know, they are in a municipal asset, and I think it's important that we establish that dialogue right away. I didn't want to add it to the motion, but I was just hopeful that you could give me some assurance that that will happen very, very promptly.
Yeah, I mean, staff said that that would be something that they would do, and I think this is different than like this property is owned by us, so first we had to get direction from council. I think, you know, it was very clear that we would design a site plan based on feedback from the community, so we have to have those discussions to get some feedback. So I can commit on behalf of staff that we'll absolutely do that. And it won't just be limited to pause. I think that Josh indicated that be other neighbors in the area that we would be interacting with. And I think that feedback is important. We certainly have our ideas about how we can keep this site sort of contained and safe, but it may be that somebody wants something different. Somebody may want a fence as opposed to trees, or may want trees as opposed to a fence. So we'll have those discussions. So you're welcome to add it to the motion, but I commit to doing it on behalf of administration. So.
Thanks. With that, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Anderson?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0. Item 11B, Housing-Focused Outreach Services.
Councillor Harrigan and Councillor Juveville, can I get you to move this, please?
Move, Mayor Caniff.
So seconded.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Anderson?
Yes.
1 second, Mayor, I think I've lost some people. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. I only have 10 voted. Okay, all votes are in. Motion passes 11-0. C, Housing Stability Worker, Chatham-Kent Legal Clinic.
Councillor Scotchy and Councillor C. McGregor, can I get you to move this, please?
So moved, Mayor Caniff.
Happy to second.
Councillor Scott, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you. I'm not, just because I have a generalized question to three of the reports that are on here, I actually can send it to Ms. Crew or to Mr. Dubin. It's not regular that we see so many sole source reports come to the, the agenda on one night. Definitely value all the variable, tangible assets in our community, but what do we do from like a cost perspective to ensure that all the costs on these sole sources are within a providable range to the services that's being provided?
Your Worship, I'll probably defer that to Jody and her team, only because specific to these contracts, we may handle it a little bit differently than we would general contracts. So I'll leave it up to them to address.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. It is a bit unusual to have so many reports come out all on one agenda package, I agree. It just was coincidence and timing in terms of when the contracts actually ended, and we did need to have a means to be able to carry on with these really valuable services to our community members. In terms of evaluation, we do work very closely with the community organizations to assess both the services and the supports that they're providing in addition to the costs. So we've got a really great relationship with our community partners, and we work closely with them to make sure that our clients receive the services they need.
Thank you. And, I definitely agree that whether it be the Chatham-Kent Legal Clinic, the, Rock Missions, Hope Haven, they're all extremely valuable assets. I just think it's also important that we know that, this isn't a service that we could be provided for that pricing. Because when you look at one or two of them, it might not be as, cost, the cost might, it doesn't look as bad as it does when you see three of them total on one agenda, right? And it is a lot of money. So I think it's just important to ensure that staff are doing their diligence to ensure that we are getting a fair and marketable rate. And it's not against anything that those valuable community partners do. They're huge assets in our community, do great work, but it's an important question that I'd rather ask before saying yes than after.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor, for your question, and I agree 100%. And these aren't services that staff are providing right now. It would be at a considerable cost for us to be able to provide those services. We would need to bring that expertise in-house, and I'm not sure that's the best solution when we do have community partners that we are able to work with who are doing an excellent job in providing the supports that we do need.
Thank you.
Councillor Story?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would build on Councillor Sakachi's comments because it is a bit unusual to see this many on one agenda, and certainly sole source is a very useful tool in many instances. I think my perspective on this was more of along the lines of maybe for the public who may not be as familiar, but is one of the reasons why we go with a sole source in these particular instances because there is no one else providing these services in the community?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that is correct.
Thank you. And just a reminder as well, one of the reasons why we're talking about the transitional cabin programming is, I think if I'm remembering, the past year or so correctly, we put out an RFP to run our emergency shelter and there were no respondents, correct?
That's correct.
So obviously it's a very challenging field to be in, so I agree with Councillor Sakachi's comments about making sure we have our due diligence, obviously, but this is a situation where we have very valuable community partners and also very few of them in this context, in this sector, so thank you for reinforcing that.
So Councillor Scott, you just clarified that you've pulled three that you had a question on this. The same answer will follow the next two.
Correct.
So I won't be going to you for comments on the other. Okay.
Thank you.
So with that, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Anderson?
Yes.
I am waiting for one more, just trying to see. Councillor Bondi not back. Okay, all votes are in. Motion passes 14-1. Sorry, there is not that was abstain, so 14-0, sorry. And 11D, sole source agreement, CK Housing First Intensive Case Management for Chronic and Episodic homelessness.
Councillor Sakatchi and Councillor Harrigan, can I get you to move this, please?
So moved, Mayor Caniff.
And seconded.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Anderson?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 14-0. And the final item under Health and Human Services, 11E, sole source agreement, Hope Haven Day Programming and Winter Warming.
Councillor Sakatchi and Councillor Wright, can I get you to move this, please?
So moved, Mayor Caniff.
I'll second it, thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Sakatchi?
I had to add one question, just because I think it's important that we say it openly. I just wanted to see if Jody could comment if there's been any word at all regarding the homeless prevention program. I know last year it was very evident that for this year that we were drew the short straw again in regards to the increase in funding. Has there been any kind of conversation that we might catch up with some of the other municipalities around us and see a significant increase like they did?
Thank you for the question, Councillor, and through you, Mr. Mayor. We haven't received any information at this point in time with regards to any provincial or federal funding that may be coming our way. Certainly, we can appreciate and understand the need for it here, and we will continue to advocate and to make sure that the needs of Chatham-Kent are known to other levels of government.
Thank you. It would definitely be nice to see that 50-60% increase instead of the 6 or 7. So that'd be great news if we got that. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Anderson?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0.
Item 12, Development Services.
12A, building permit fees.
Councillor Doyle and Councillor Anderson, can I get you to move this, please?
Happy to move that, Mayor.
Councillor Doyle, floor is yours, then I'll move to Councillor Anderson.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So mine's, I've already got the answer for this question, but just for the public's knowledge as well, because I didn't like the answer, but it's kind of what we have to do. So it said that in the agenda that BDS's target is 1.5 times, and we're at 3. So my hope was to use some of that money and potentially move it over to the tiny cabin program. So is there already rules with regards to what we're allowed to use this money for, or could we move it over and use that for the tiny homes?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Bill 124, which came in effect in 2005 and created the legislation behind how the building codes implemented and how fees are there. It was very specific that any surplus in a year gets put into what's called a reserve fund that's legislated to be only used for the building code reason. So we cover wages of building inspectors, the vehicles, the equipment, any some of the IT resources, any of the direct relations. But council has no authority to move it out of that reserve to pay for another municipal service.
That's too bad. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, if I may, Your Worship, the rationale for that legislation is because as municipalities go through peaks and troughs in terms of development, the province wants to make sure that there's always enough money to at least pay for your basic building department functions, because otherwise, if you see a community that isn't getting any revenue on fees, then the fear is that they will cut back on inspectors. And so it's a public safety reason for it. It's not a reserve that we can use for other things other than maintaining, a strong building department presence during those troughs when you don't see a lot of development. Chatham-Kent, fortunately, has seen whether it was some revenue from wind a number of years ago or whether it was the recent sort of growth, we have a very healthy reserve. And we're not the only municipality. There's other municipalities, obviously, during the whole COVID period that went through pre-COVID and into early COVID that went through the same thing. And they'd love to take the money for other things, but unfortunately, the legislation doesn't allow that.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. Appreciate it.
No. Bruce, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Maybe just quickly to add that a little bit, I think to CEO's point, 2020, 21, 22 were very busy years with a lot of permit applications, and I know our chief building officials over here as well. They, it was a matter of they went through a lot of building permit applications in those times, collect a lot of revenue. So it is an opportunity now. Like it's a user pay system basically to provide some fee breaks to the users over the next couple of years until the reserve, and we'll keep monitoring the status of the reserve over that time. But I think it is an opportunity, giving we've had some other fee increases in other areas to reduce some fees for the development community for the next couple of years. Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that, Bruce. Thanks, and appreciate definitely decreasing these fees when some other ones have went up. So thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Mr. Mayor, and through you, I just want to take the opportunity to commend the building department and the work that's been done on this, to recognize that because we have a surplus, we're definitely, CK is definitely not in the business of making money off of developmental or building charges. So the fact that we recognize that we have a surplus and we have the opportunity to decrease rates, and that we're willing to do that, I think that it's very, very commendable. Also, my hope is that not only will it encourage more building developments to happen, but also if it's not costing so much, then maybe things can be, whether it's rent or the sale of or whatever, could also potentially decrease. So I just want to commend this report, and I appreciated reading it, and I think that this is exactly what we stand for in CK.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Anderson?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Item 13, Finance, Budget, Information, Technology, and Transformation.
13C, 2023 Annual Investment Report.
As this is an information report, so Councillor Doyle, you had a question?
Thank you, Mayor. I just had one question. I just want to know what do we have in our reserves right now compared to what we have in our investments? And then can you just explain the difference between the two, like what we're using that money for?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Matt Torrance is on the line and is going to answer those.
Matt, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So we have approximately $280 million in reserves, and that's between the municipal and the PUC. And then we have about $169 million in our investments, $94 million in the equity-backed investments, and about $75 million in the fixed income, which are like GICs or similar to GICs. So essentially, what we're doing with our investments is we're taking our reserves and we're investing them, trying to get a greater return than what we can get on the interest that our bank pays us. So essentially, they are the same thing. It's just how we're managing, trying to get a greater return on our cash holdings. So does that answer your question?
That answers it perfectly. Thank you very much, Matt. I appreciate that.
Okay, seeing no other questions, item 13D, the record of payment of council-owned vendors, it was pulled because there's a couple conflicts, but given this information report, we don't need any to move it. Is there any questions regarding that? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, the communication items. Councillor McGrail, you wanted to talk about item 2C.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Caniff. So I do have a couple questions, and it's related to now the third proposal in regards to Dresden and York 1, environmental waste solutions. So, Bruce, can you please explain what this third proposal is asking for, and who is actually providing this third proposal, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the third proposal that just came out was it last week? Let's say last week, beginning of last week, is directly from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks and the Minister directly. The proposal is open till May 10th, and the nature of it is they are asking for comments to designate the project under the Environmental Assessment Act. So they will accept comments on that over the, and that's something that obviously the municipality has put in writing that we believe it should be. We've submitted our first comments a couple weeks ago. We'll be submitting the second ones tomorrow. And what that means is if, you know, once they submit all the comments, the approval actually has to come from the Lieutenant Governor Council and Cabinet to make that decision on whether to designate it as a project on the Environmental Assessment Act. When that'll happen, I don't know. They'll probably take some time after all the comments have been received, you know, from the community and the public after May 10th. So that, I hope that answers that question. That's really what that's all about. It's, I guess from the standpoint of, you know, from the community standpoint, the ministry's obviously heard the initial comments that they feel the minister was on the record there a few weeks ago saying that this would be coming, but it does have to be done by provincial cabinet.
So can we stress the importance of the comments for this third proposal? Because I believe the ministry is looking at this, and the comments that come into this is to proceed with the EA. Because right now, the environmental assessment, the EAA, is not a for sure thing. And I'm not sure the chances of getting an EA through this process, or if this is just the natural steps to take to get an EA. Can we talk about that for a second, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is the next step that the province has to take before they can designate it. They have to actually put it out for public comment period. That's a minimum of 45 days. And then actually Cabinet then has to make a decision on that. So just to your point, you know, anyone can submit comments if they have concerns before the next, it's May 10th is the deadline for that. The other proposal, actually, it's Thursday is the second one, because those applications are still technically posted for the landfill environmental compliance. So we will be releasing the municipality's submission. It'll be very similar to the first one we did a couple weeks ago with some nuances, you know, around the landfill component. But and then we'll subsequently be preparing the third one before that May 10th deadline as well for submission.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I really want to stress at this moment that all of Chatham-Kent, if you believe in Dresden and Dresden's fight, is to get on and make your comments and make it very clear, you know, if you're not going to just all out nix this project, to at least ask for an environmental assessment. It's very, very, very important. Up to this point, those comments, you know, got us here and where we are, and I thank everybody. But this next round is very, very, very important that we get out, we do our comments, and we make it very clear to the ministry and to the province. We don't want this proposal at all, but if we're going to continue through this process, that we at least get our environmental assessment for the next steps.
If I can, Your Worship, I agree with Councillor McGrail, and I think it needs to be pointed out that by asking for an environmental assessment, that does not mean you're supporting the project. I think that's where some members of the public may be concerned that, well, if I ask for an environmental assessment, does that mean that once that process is done, I'm happy? So I think you're absolutely right. People need to understand if you objected to the first one and you don't want to see it, then you really need to respond to this one as well. And if you want to indicate that, look, I don't support it, but at the very least, you have to go through an environmental assessment process. So I agree. I think that's something we've got to make really clear to the public.
Great, thank you. So my next question real quick, Bruce, I know we talked a couple council meetings ago about doing a council meeting in regards to an update on this project and where the municipality stands. Can you give us an update of what you think should be or will be going on with that, please?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So obviously, this last letter in submission kind of changed things a little bit here. So our intention, just given timing, is obviously to make that final submission. And then we intend to bring a report to council after that with a summary of all the submissions, I think, for the public. So everybody will have that in council. If there are any, additional questions, they can be asked at that time, but it'll be, after the submission date at this point, probably whatever the next meeting is in May. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. One more thing is on every counselor's desk, I put a brochure. It says Dresden Cared. So this is a group organized by citizens and residents of Dresden. So please take a look at this. Their next meeting is this Thursday, April 11th at the Ken Houston Arena. I believe at 6 o'clock, sorry. So, you don't need to be just from Dresden to come out. To listen and to have a listen on what's going on. Also, I put on your desk they've gotten 3,000 people to sign their little petition here, and it's individually. So if you have a read and if you support, please sign that, and I can take it, and I will pass it on for you. And that's all I have, I think, right now. Thank you.
Councillor Juvenile, you had something to add to this topic?
Yeah, I support everything Councillor McGrail said, but for anyone listening, if you do want to email those comments, it's an easy email address. It's dresdenlandfill@ontario.ca. So you have it right there. Just type up your email and send it to dresdenlandfill@ontario.ca. And again, I echo what Councillor McGrail said about attending the meeting this Thursday. They are a very hardworking, impassioned group of citizens, and they provided a lot of factual information that it's just a good learning curve for all of us to see what they have learned and gain a little bit of knowledge about what is going on with the whole proposal with York 1. Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Doyle, there's 4 items you want to talk about, B, C, E, and G. So we'll start with B.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So B, that was the Enbridge one. So it just says there that they wanted us to, looks like show or send a letter or resolution, and they wanted us to vote on that tonight to see if we could send that resolution for securing access to natural gas for a community in Ontario. So I would like to just make a motion to support them and send a letter.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Finn, anyone opposed? Motion carries. All right.
Okay, thank you.
2C.
2C, that one, Councillor McGrail did everything with that one, so we can skip that one.
Oh, sorry, okay. Yes, done, okay.
2E, can we send a support letter, just trying to get to it. Can we send a support letter to urge against cuts that the federal government is planning to do to affordable housing?
Do you want to put a motion, send a letter?
Yeah, motion to send, I'm just trying to find it in here. Basically a motion to send a letter to the federal government asking them not to cut more funding for the affordable housing.
Okay, we have a seconder to that. Councillor C. McGregor, anyone opposed? Motion carries. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, can we, on both of those letters, can we send that to Roma too, please? CC Roma on that, please. And fellow communities.
And FCM?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody, just send it to everybody. Okay.
Roma, AMO, and FCM.
BC.
And MP, yes. And 4G.
4G, and that was just with regards to I didn't know if we need to do 2 different letters or not. That was again with regards to the natural gas. It just was another community sending one, so it's just going to be sent a similar letter, but I presume
that covers it.
That covers it, and that's everything for me. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wright and Councillor Allen, can I get you to move the rest of the communication items, please?
I'll move it.
Anyone opposed?
Happy to second.
Motion carries. Non-agenda, Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. There was an interesting announcement in Ontario I'm sure we all heard of last week, and that was the announcement of an agreement between the province and the city of Ottawa to upload a provincially owned highway, Highway 174. So I think you'll all remember back in December, there was an agreement to upload the Gardner Expressway from Toronto to the province, and we sent off our request, our measly request, that we would like some of our roads uploaded as well. So I thought it was important to point out this development as we anxiously await for a similar agreement and announcement from the province and with partnership in Chatham-Kent.
Councillor Wright.
Spends every year his pie money pretty good. But they've applied for a grant for $25,000 from a BASF Growing Home Community Funding Contest. There were 600 nominees went in. Right now they're in second place for it. So they're asking if anybody could go on and support them at the Highgate District Agricultural Society or their face page to vote for them. So they're looking for the community support because they're trying to win here. So thank you.
Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I just wanted to share my sincere thanks to Chief Case and his team and everyone in our first responders today for helping probably behind the scenes perhaps more than we realized, but to make sure that we were all safe and sound during a very exciting total solar eclipse. Those of us who were able to travel to South-Kent to see it, I was one of them, and it was just a remarkable experience that I will never forget. And everything that I saw from Chatham to the South-Kent area went extremely smoothly. So thank you to you and all of your team, police, fire, EMS, everyone involved in the first response to make sure it was a really safe and enjoyable day for all of the visitors that came to Chatham-Kent and for our residents too. Just thank you very much for your efforts today. Really appreciate it.
Okay, we'll move to the first and second reading. Councillor B. McGregor and Councillor Bondy, can I each move that, please?
So moved.
And seconded.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Third and final reading, Councillor McGrail and Councillor Jubenville.
I will put it forth.
And seconded?
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. We'll close out the meeting. Councillor Crew and then Councillor Harrigan. Can I get you to wrap up the open session, then we'll move to closed.
I move that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its next meeting to be held Monday, April 29th, 2024, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act. I so move.
So seconded.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, we'll move to closed session. Thanks, everyone.